are really critical to anything you want to do with people. So what I propose is just for a few minutes, I want to talk about a couple of those things. We'll probably come back to the parking garage a couple times. And then I've under-prepared, as I usually do, for those of you that know me, so that you can have time for Q&A. So be thinking about your questions. If the spirit moves you, you can just blurt them out. We'll just handle them as they come. So, the lesson, first of all, there's a thought that comes to your mind in these situations, and I've been in a bunch of them now, and that is when you're experiencing a crisis with somebody else and it's their crisis, you very quickly have this thought, and I just want you to close your eyes and imagine you're there. She's about to jump. The first thought is this: there is something she's thinking about to make her want to jump. And if I say that thing, she's going to jump. If I say that thing, the trigger, she dies. You know what it is. That's an honest thought. Then there's this second thought, and it follows right behind, attached to the train. You can't not think this, I think. The second thought is this: hey, hero, she's waiting for you to say the perfectly crafted appeal that'll make her change her mind and want to live. And when you say that thing, she'll come over the guardrail and she'll go to the hospital. So you better figure out what it is, you better say it. Then we win. Honest thought. And what's the problem with both of the thoughts? Yeah. It's not about me. Whose decision is it to jump? It's hers. Who got us up here? Sure wasn't me. And who's going to get us off this parking garage one way or another? She will. Now replace her with your children, and your employees, and your business partners, and your clients, and your prospects. Whose decision is it to do business with you? In every sense of the word, it's theirs. Since leaving the parking garage, I became a hostage negotiator, been a hostage negotiator for almost 12 years now. I've handled things way worse, way more intense than just a young woman who may or may not jump off of a building. And what I've learned is we're in control of Jack and Squat, and Jack left town. Okay? Other people have to decide. And we can't convince anybody of anything. The Holy Spirit does that. But there are a few principles and a few habits that you can have that can make you extremely effective at conducting discovery with people and finding out why it is that they might be on top of a parking garage, or why it is that they don't want to go to bed at bedtime, or take the trash out, right, ladies, or why they can't follow your simple expectations as a business owner. And the dynamic is very much the same. If you want stronger agreements, which is what negotiation is about, if you want stronger agreements, the kinds of agreements that are very resilient and serve the person, not just the proposition, then it is about relationship, it's about connection. And if you want a relationship with a human person, it's about listening, not about talking. Because when you listen to people, they will tell you why or how they will do business with you. If you listen to that young lady, she'll eventually tell you the story, the narrative, right, of how we came to be on top of this parking garage. And if you listen to your children, they'll tell you what they're struggling with in terms of their personal holiness and their obedience. And if you listen to your employees, they'll want to do business with you. That's the lesson, right? Listen. So it's the foundation for negotiation. just do one more lesson and then we'll do some Q&A. The second lesson is, what if I told you there was one human activity that would help you, and I'm going to steal from the mission statement of the Catholic Assembly here for business. What if I told you there's one human activity that would help you be successful at home, at work, and in the community? And would be one of the greatest aids, I think, in your own personal holiness. Would you be interested in investing in that thing? Well, great. The beauty is you don't have to even invest any money, just some time. Because active listening is the skill of skills. Everything you know how to do really well that you probably get paid money to do, you learned originally from listening to other people that know how to do it. And anything good that we do probably comes when we listen to the Holy Spirit, right? When we listen to Jesus in the Gospels. And yet, what does our prayer life look like? Best word I can think of to describe my own is chattering. Oh man, if you could just do this, I'd have way more time to, do what you want to. A great model for us in listening is Christ in the Gospels. He's continually dealing with people that are on the ledge. Continually dealing with people that are trying to shout him down. And what does he do? His response. At times there's eloquence, but look at his personal encounters in the Gospels. What's he doing mostly? Listening. You wouldn't think he'd have to do that. Probably doesn't. But that's how he's modeling evangelization for us. And that's difficult, because if I asked you to draw a picture of evangelization, you would probably draw a picture of someone at an ambo, someone at a lectern, preaching the word. But in practice, I will tell you, functionally, it looks like that's what? Doing what Jesus did, encountering people where they're at, and then drawing them to someplace that's better. That is a wonderful job description for a hostage negotiator, just so you know. We encounter people where they're at. We invite their story respectfully. We treat the story with respect, right? And we help people see things. What we know is this, and this is in your spiritual life, this is in your business life, and this is in your home life. Vision drives decisions. How people around you see the world, that's how they make their decisions. If the decision is maybe I should come to this building, you need to know what they're looking at. Because you'll find out that the family is the reason why they're going to jump off the building. But we struggle to see that because family is probably what keeps us sane for us. That can be really hard to wrap your head around. But getting curious about other people's stories is really the foundation for evangelization, is the foundation for successful business. We would love to sell people what we want to sell them on our terms. But isn't it true that most of your sales happen when you actually finally discover what the client wants, and then what? The pain that is driving that decision, why they need it? That's the lesson. So, listening has a very special relationship with negotiating. So what's cool is all of that, plus you can make a lot of money at it if you're really good at it. That's kind of a little side bonus. But you can also save souls. Pretty good business to be in. So, it's kind of two lessons for you then, right? Is that it's not about us. Other people make decisions, and what we do is we put ourselves in a position to help them make better decisions, to have clarity, right? And then the second lesson, of course, is that listening is the skill of skills. If you get good at that, and there are really practical habits, asking good questions, making summaries, addressing emotions, that can make you a great listener. And those two things really serve the mission of this organization. And I would guess, not even knowing you, I know this is very presumptive, that it would make you a better human being at whatever you do, just based on experience. Listening It's a page out from the 911 center here in Sedgwick County, and it says SWAT negotiators needed. Because now I'm not a scared police officer 2 years into the job looking at some lady's eyes going, I don't know what to say. Now I'm a trained professional. It's a team sport, so there's going to be probably 8 negotiators in our community that are all going to get up and throw on our negotiator vests, which is pretty cool, actually. And we're going to converge to the scene of the crisis. And this is something to remember. The police have called the police. By its nature, my work is life or death. And it's as simple as this. If we make a connection with that person and invite their story without judgment and listen so well that we help them see things differently, then people live. If we work as a team and listen to them, people live. I've also been on the scenes where that wasn't possible and people die. So for me, listening is life or death. What about you? You're like, hey, we won't do any of that. I mean, our management style is pretty bad, but nobody's jumped out the building yet, you know? This is my proposition to you. And the best Catholic tradition or proposition, which you're all familiar with, being as all the men in here are married, I would propose to you that if relationships are based in listening, that you could take your most valuable, most resilient, most fruitful human relationship, hopefully, gentlemen, it's your wife, okay? If I remove the listening from that relationship, it would not last 2 weeks. If you never listen to that person and they never listen to you ever again, 2 weeks, I would lay money down. That's how important it is to human relationship, is to feel like you've been listened to and understood and respected. So if you remove listening, that relationship dies. If your company's culture is such that nobody listens to the other valuable members of the team, that company will die. If you stop listening to your clients, your prospective clients, your company's going to die. My situations play out in terms of hours. The longest engagement I've been in was 30 hours. That's a long time. But that's a fast report card. What I found working with firms is that the life or death of the firm, based upon the listening quotient, plays out over years. But the psychological term for that is languishing, if you didn't know. When we don't have something we need psychologically, we die. And the term for that is languishing. And we've probably all worked in companies that were languishing over the years. Hopefully not the one you're in now, since you're the owner. So my challenge for you is just to play with this idea that for your families and for your firms and for our community, listening is life or death. Because the beautiful thing is that when you see somebody really engage in listening and accept it as their craft, all of their human relationships begin to flourish. And when I've seen companies decide that active listening is the way we're going to communicate, they flourish. So it's a powerful option for good too. So that's kind of the end of my prepared remarks. You probably want to know how the story ended though, don't you? Yeah. You do run out of material. And then there may be more questions that you don't know the answers to. And if you are in the kind of work, which I bet most of you are, where you are a problem solver, when the people that you think you should be solving their problems begin to ask you questions that you don't know the answer to, how does that make you feel? Catholic theology is beautiful, but it's not very persuasive when the other person doesn't respect the authority and duty of the church, and you don't take the time to find out what they actually believe. That was a lesson. Eventually, I got so frustrated and I was totally out of options that I unfortunately was pretty selfish. And I looked down at my feet and I looked across the street, across Broadway, and I looked back at her and I said, why are we here? What I meant was, if we were across the street, that's zone 22, that's somebody else's problem. But here, this is 21. But she took it maybe a better way. She took it as an invitation to tell a story. She said, because this is the building that my uncle jumped off of 6 years ago tonight. So family was important. And then I realized maybe I could just ask some questions of her. That might be good. So I just started asking questions. And I just asked as many questions as I can. By the way, that's not the best way to negotiate with people. But it was the only thing I knew what to do. And finally, very rudely, she interrupted me when I was asking a really beautiful question, I'm sure. And she says, I think you're actually trying to listen to me, which is a great metaphor for marriage, by the way. And I said, lady, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And she climbed over the guardrail. And she said, where are we going to go? So the last lesson for you is that night on that parking garage began a journey that I did not intend. Before that night, I had no inclination to be a negotiator. But that night began a journey, walking down the steps of that parking garage, that would lead me, weirdly enough, to speak to you today at the cathedral. Didn't intend it. That's the best part. And that young woman walked the first couple steps of the journey with me. So, my question for you is the first question I was asked on that journey, intellectually speaking. I met a negotiator very soon after that, and said, hey, this happened to me. I don't know what that was, but I want to do it. I want to be good at it. And he said, great. How good do you want to be? That's a pretty good question. I said, I want to be excellent. That's the seminary thing. All right, Ted? And he's like, good, let's begin. So, that's my question for you to end the talk in open Q&A. How good do you want to be? How good do you want to be when the stakes are life or death for your human relationships and the valuable organizations and communities that we serve? So with that, I'd open it up for questions for you. We have a little bit of time. Okay, we got Arnie. Mike.
Dan, any idea where the young lady is today and how she's doing?
I do, and I can't talk about that. Yep. So the thing I'll say is we're not called for that. We encounter people and we serve them, but they're going to go on their own path. So. She's an important part of my journey. I hope I was a part of hers. And then we tend to part ways. In my line of work, we don't collect friends. We try to get them to a place of therapy, a good place where they have support, and we have to let them go. Otherwise, I would have a very large collection of friends that I couldn't invite to dinner. I do other things for the police department, so yeah, I collect a lot of very interesting single-serving friends. Talk to Al later, he can tell you some stories. Yeah.
In your process, when you're with them on the ledge,
Okay.
trying to get them to change their mind, where does honesty rank in there and drive to get them to change their mind?
That's awesome. And the question you answered, what about honesty? Because I kind of left the cliffhanger there. Like, could you lie to her when she asks you the questions, right? No. Deception, especially in hostage negotiation and crisis negotiation, is a spectrum. And there will be a temptation to have very complex deceptions because they nicely and neatly solve dilemmas sometimes. And what you learn very quickly, don't go there. Because it gets really complicated. And you got to fool yourself before you can fool somebody else, and it's almost impossible. So for our policies, we don't lie in a sense. We do engage in what I call super low-level deception. We won't answer a question when we do know the answer. Example would be, there was a situation, somebody had hurt somebody, and we knew they had died. But he didn't know yet. And he's like, did they make it? We're like, we don't know. It's a lie, we know. But we also know if we bring that up, it's going to create a huge obstacle. We're deferring the truth until later. That's as far as we'll go. It's a great example. So let's go to a great example would be like, well, how do we answer this lady's 2 questions then? Because what happens when you say yes, if you didn't realize it, is you create obstacles in a negotiation that you didn't have to have. She doesn't believe in God, and she's very ambivalent about whether suicide is wrong. And if you say you think it's wrong, she'll kind of judge you, because she's about to do it. So what you learn is, honest questions do deserve honest answers, and those are not honest questions. I can tell you now, firmly, on the basis of about 12 years of experience, those aren't honest questions. She's not actually asking you, theologically, do you believe in a higher power? Do you believe in Jesus Christ? She's not asking you that. She's actually telling you. Do you know what she's saying? This is serious. I'm very dangerous right now. Before you engage in a conversation with me, or come over here with me, you should know that. I'm thinking about some really deep stuff. That's what she's telling you. The response to her question is not yet. It's not a yes or no question. Gentlemen, for the sake of your marriage, it is not a yes or no question. The proper response is anything from, seems like you're thinking about some really deep stuff. Seems like there's a lot on your mind. It sounds like this is a serious situation. That's the response. It's attunement. You're demonstrating, I recognize what you're actually telling me and the seriousness of this emotionally. Now she'll do business with you. Here in a few short minutes, she's going to want to know what you think she should do if you continue down that really powerful track of reflecting back to her what's really going on, and not just treating it as a yes or no question.
So it seems like you're going down the road of saying, I understand what you're asking, even though that's not what you just asked. That's kind of a hairy road.
Yeah, but it's the right road. I'm just telling you. One thing we'll never say, for instance, a trained negotiator in our system will never say, I understand. Because you don't. And you're like, God, it's really wise. I'm like, about the 50th time that a person on methamphetamines has said, you don't understand bleep, you recognize, hey, I don't think we should say this anymore. Write that down. We're not going to say that anymore. You know? But the 3rd time you do it, you hear a deer rifle go off. You know? Do you understand me now? I'm like, make it no, we're not going to say that anymore. I know we wrote it down before, but I'm really going to remember it this time. The proper response when you think that you need to say, I understand, would be to summarize everything they said. And then they're like, you got me. But the 3rd time somebody says, you get me, when you do that, this is where habits are formed. It's like the rub the belly thing. Oh, that felt good. I'm going to keep doing that. Summary seems to be something really important to people. Instead of saying, yeah, I understand. You've been here 2 minutes, Jack. You don't even know my name yet. And you understand me? Sounds like you just want to get 10-8 and get back to the quick trip for a soda. She's not wrong. She's not wrong. Thought about that a couple times. You know what sounds really good right now? Not being here. That's what I could go for, a nice cold glass of that. So, then you miss out on the journey. Now I know. One more question. Oh, yes, sir.
How do you slow yourself down enough to come up with the proper answer? And then a lot of us, even though we might try to listen, we think we need to come up with an answer like this.
All right, I did not plant him in the audience. This is such a good question. How do you slow yourself down? That's really it. You won't. If we all walk out of here and try to stretch our legs and walk off them business and gravy, and you walk down to that same parking garage and you look up and there's another person, you're like, first of all, you're like, they need some locks on stuff around here. They need gates and fences, right? No, if you ran to the top and you were there, this talk probably won't help you very much. You're like, but it was so good. I know, it was great. That's not how people work. You'll forget this. You will remember it when you get back to the bottom of the parking garage at the end of it. You're like, oh man, we're supposed to ask their name. Because names are powerful. Makes a personal connection. There's a craft process that I firmly believe in. Take anything you can do well. Okay? Anything. I don't care. It begins with an experience. It usually begins as a hobby. Because of that, it's something we enjoy, or we've had a knack for. If you're in your Socratic dialogues, if you're into Socrates, it's a knack. It makes a distinction between knack and talent, knack and a habit, knack and skill. And then we start learning. So it's knowledge. Today, this is knowledge. Read a book, knowledge. YouTube, knowledge. Chatting with somebody, knowledge. That's good. At some point we cross the line into skill. We take the knowledge and we can do something with it. That's when you start getting paid for stuff. Where's Dr. McCormick? Professors are a special case where you can actually get paid just for knowing things. Everyone else can do some stuff. He's going to beat me up later in the alley. And that's great. Here's what I know. There are a few crafts where skills are not enough either. And one of them is active listening to people in crisis. It has to be a habit. That's the next stage. If you rehearse and inoculate yourself to stress and get coaching especially is really helpful, then you cross the line into a habit. And that means if I walk out here, yes. If there was a gentleman out here with a knife to his femoral artery, which has happened to me, not at the cathedral. Methodists, that's usually what you all the time. But if you then, I would tell you, if it was a hobby, you're going back inside and calling the police. If it was just knowledge, you're going to forget it and freeze. If it's skill, you'll also forget it and probably freeze. But when it's your habit, you'll be like, hey man, what's your name? That's different. Because I would love to tell you that you'll rise to the occasion. That's not been my experience. You fall back on your habits. You fall back on your habits in your spiritual life, when you experience dryness. You fall back on your habits in parenting, when you're tired at the end of the day. In the morning, oh man, could have handled the tantrum fine. It's 8 o'clock. Habits are what rule the day for us under pressure. So that's what I would say. How do you slow down? You rehearse that. How do you slow down? Work in a team. That's why there's marriage, right? Work in a team. Hey, help me do this. When you see me speeding things up, help me slow down. One thing we do, I keep coming back to summaries, I don't know why, it's one of the 8 active listening skills. Summaries are how I slow down. Well, hang on. Let me make sure I understand you. Different than I understand, right? You guys all got here, there was business and gravy. Dan keeps talking about business and gravy. Maybe Dan really likes business and gravy, is that what you're saying? Yeah. And that's how you slow down. Oh, go ahead, I got that now, thank you. So, controlling the pace of the interaction is really important for listening. Slowing your life down is a really important part of the process for listening to the Holy Spirit. So, that ends the sermon. Bowling great, took the waiters. What do I do now? Turn over to the lake, I think.
Well, we still have some, if you're okay, we still have time for a few more questions here.
Oh yeah, we did, look at that.
Yeah.
All right.
I know there's more questions out there.
I just felt like maybe the energy was tapering off and, the hook was coming, but we don't get plenty of time. I would love like 3 more questions.
We could role play if somebody wants to stand
Somebody
up
wants to jump, yeah.
What's another instance in your career that sticks out as a beautiful one?
Here's a good one. I'm going to use some euphemisms, is that okay? Yeah. A gentleman, that's euphemism. In an interesting part of Wichita, that's euphemism. Not the Wichita part. He was a small business owner, that's euphemism. Dealing in pharmaceutical sales. Unfortunately, and this happens, y'all ever had problems collecting from clients who are in arrears? Raise your hand. Yeah, I can help you with that, by the way. He had a And then the client dipped into the inventory while my small business owner was out making his rounds. Okay, deals math, the guy stole his math. It's his roommate, which is complicated. Never do business with roommates, right? Because that's a good lesson. And so the solution, because it's obvious to all of us, was that he woke his roommate up by putting a gun to his face and then shooting it off next to his ear later on to get his attention. And it's quite an attention getter. And this is interesting. He then handcuffed him to his banister in their apartment. And I think his plan kind of ran out of steam at that point. My dad has told me that you can't squeeze blood from a turnip. And I think that was the problem. The meth was gone. So now what are you going to do? So he actually called a neighbor to come over. The guy's telling him where he took the meth and sold it. So he's going to go over and confirm the story, but he's an army of one. It's a problem. So he calls a neighbor to come over. He didn't tell him why. And then he gets there, he's like, hey, can you watch this guy? I gotta go check this thing and I'll come back. Well, the neighbor's like, yeah, sure. Then he sees what's going on. So he's like, I'm out. I'm not playing this game. And he goes, God bless him. He goes home and he calls 911. Now he calls 911 a couple of hours later. If there were law enforcement, they'd be like, yeah, that's totally normal. It's not an easy decision. I gotta live here, you know? So then when we get involved, that's the situation. And I'm the primer, I call into that house, and this guy answers the phone. And there's a few pleasantries back and forth, which I wouldn't be. And he says this, and I want you to, this is a little different than the Luke God. This is what he tells me. He says, look, I should tell you, he's dishonorably discharged from the Army. He's severely and persistently mentally ill, he's bipolar. He's not taking any medications if you don't count meth as a medication. Which most of you don't, that's fine. Kind of uptight, I guess, whatever. The day before, he had shot his other neighbor. So it's just a wonderful neighborhood. I can put you into it really great right now. It's prices are so high. And then the week before, he'd been into a car chase with sheriff's deputies and wrecked the car, got away. There's a Oblinger in the car. So the whole thing just screams, this isn't going to end very well. Let's get Oblinger on the phone. Right? So he says this, knowing all that. Listen, you're a cop. I don't trust cops. I'll never trust you. You probably think you're some kind of negotiator, but that's not how this is going to go. And I looked down at my vest that said, negotiator. And I turned to my coach and said, he's on to us, boys. Pack it up. Our grip won't work here. So what do you say to that guy? Now you start to get it, hopefully. This is actually, in a way, it's easier than the parking garage because now you got some material to work with. And I'm slowing it down for you. It's not conversational speed. What would you say to the gentleman who said that? You probably think you're a negotiator, but that's not how this is going to go. I went on like this. Depressed people are the hardest. The people that don't want to tell their story, the people that are very inwardly focused with pain, chronic pain, psychic pain, very hard to work with. And many of you may know this. This is a very common ailment in our community. Angry people are the best. They're so easy. Because I got some things to tell you people very quickly becomes storytelling time with Uncle Oblinger. It's fantastic. I'm like, yeah. Man, sounds like you have a plan. How's it going to go? And he laid it all out for us. You're going to do this and that. And by the way, this is where it's dangerous to be a dad. Because he's like, this and that. I've heard these stories before from my children. Let me tell you, it's going to work here. I'm like, okay, 3-year-old. How's it going to go? My 3-year-old yesterday. You're going to buy this. I'm like, I don't think I am. But as a negotiator, I'm like, it's very interesting. Sounds like this is an important thing to you. Yep. All right. So why is it I'm going to buy this for you? And he's like, oh, because I want it. I'm like, it's classic. How much money do you think this is? He said, 100. It's very Hebrew and it's like numbers. Like it just means he thinks it's really expensive. Right? It was a car. Right? A real car. hurts. It's really complicated. The prices are up, is what I told him. I'm like, how much money do you think I had? He said $1 million. I'm like, well, I'm not going in to talk to these people tomorrow if I got $1 million. All right? But if you listen to people, they'll explain. Same thing with this guy. He wants to tell you the story about how this is going to happen. Fantastic. Because, by the way, it didn't happen that way. Spoiler alert. None of that happened. That's not what's important. The important thing is when people tell their story. In general, in crisis, when people are talking, we're winning. All of us. Because we've been off the bad emotions, and our vision changes. When your emotion changes, your vision changes. Oh, there's more to this. Yes, vision drives emotions. Emotion shapes vision. How people feel about a thing is how they see it. Interesting point. This is a really good lesson. And I'm going to make some people mad. That's okay. Do you see yourself as a rational actor? What I mean by that is, by and large, most of the decisions you make are concrete, rational, and logical. You use your cortex. You weigh the pros and cons, and what the best decision is, based upon an analysis, that's what you do. Raise your hand if that's generally how you run your business. Awesome. Okay. Who you're thinking? I was like, I don't know, I feel like that's me. Salute to you, people. Yeah. He can build your website. Who here says, well, I mean, I want to say that again, but honestly, I'm an emotional actor. 100% of my decisions are emotional decisions. The emotional brain is largely how I decide. How I feel about a thing is how I'm going to decide. And three. I'm going to count myself. 4 honest people in the room. That's great. It's pretty good. That's pretty good. I'll take it. That's a win. 100% of your decisions are emotional decisions. You make no decisions without the emotional brain. Is that hard? Is that a hard saying? Is there murmuring? Will you leave? I know you're not convinced. There's a neuroscientist named Antonio Damasio, very famous in that field. He famously had a client. This gentleman was a professional, not unlike those of you in the room. But he had a brain tumor. The brain tumor was operable during the operation. They successfully removed the brain tumor, but in the process, they severed a connection between his rational brain and his emotional brain. And after some time of suffering, he was referred to Dr. Damasio. And he ran a battery of tests, and they found he was perfectly healthy. There was nothing wrong with his brain, per se. He could use his rational brain just fine. He could give pros and cons all day long. But what was happening was his life was being destroyed. His wife had left him, he had lost his job, he had to move back in with his parents. And Dr. Damasio finally figured out what was wrong with one question. He said, this is powerful. When should we meet again? And the gentleman could lay out the pros and the cons of selecting a future date for this next scheduled appointment for the next 2 months. But he couldn't decide. Because the emotional brain is what ultimately decides. Many times, in fact, we hope most of the time, it's informed by the pros and cons. Right? The rational brain is involved in the process. But your amygdala, your limbic system, that's how we decide. And I can tell you again, in 12 years of intensive consultation with people that are making very important personal decisions, yes. I have never convinced anyone with pros and cons. I've never made a logical appeal and had it land. Ever. That's 15 years of parenting, 12 years of hostage negotiation, and 8 years of intensive investigative work. It's just not how people decide. But I've been very successful when you discover how we see things and then address the emotional brain. For the police department, we do the verbal de-escalation training. We tell people, you have 2 brains inside of you. You've got your lizard brain and your wizard brain. Guess who makes the decisions? Unfortunately, the lizard. So, guess who we're going to do business with? Lizards. You seem frustrated. hearing you're depressed is way more powerful than, let me explain 10 reasons why you should live. So, that's my answer, I guess. Pretty good story, right? So this gentleman, when we began the conversation, very quickly it's an authority and power issue. He wants to feel like he's in control. And guess what? What's free is letting people think they're in control. At the end of the day, we know better. So, we tricked him out of his hostage because we didn't treat him like a hostage. He didn't want to pick up the extra charge, so he was like dancing around the issue. Well, there's this guy in here. I'm like, oh great, yeah, can I talk to him? Not right now, I didn't want to talk to you. I'm like, huh? All right, well, he's in a lot of trouble. And the guy's like, what? I'm like, yeah, you better put him on the phone. I got something to tell him. He's like, he didn't know what to do. He's like, all right, put him on the phone. I'm like, Brandon, you need to come out. He's like, I don't think I can. Now later, he's looking in the gun, you know. I'm like, well, look, if you can't come out, then you're some kind of hostage. And that's not what I'm hearing. And the guy's like, again, this is low-level deception, right? The neighbor's like, for sure, he's a hostage, no doubt in my mind, right? I'm like, I'm getting this straight from the source. He's saying he's not. And so it came down to this back and forth a little bit, and then he's like, yeah, fine, Brandon's gonna leave. All right. And then the tone changes. So perhaps you're speaking to the emotional brain, and then what happens when the emotions change? Before it was about control and power, now it's suicidal. It's not a hostage situation anymore, now it's a more traditional crisis. So we have to change. The beautiful thing about listening is that I don't have to change how I listen. I'm just going to change my observations and what I say. So, but that's just an interesting, that's a dime a dozen kind of story, and that's not, it may sound exotic to you, it's not exotic in my world, but it just shows you a totally different person with a totally different emotional makeup and a totally different set of problems. But listening is still the way we're going to do business, because we have to find out what the differences are. Good stuff. Another question? Yes?
Do you have some resources for us if we want to become better listeners? How do we go about doing that?
Great. There's no way not to do this or self-promotion. I wrote a book called Life or Death Listening. There are better books, but I don't know of a better book on listening, unfortunately. Please write that. If somebody would write that one, that'd be great. And the way you'll need it, can you close your ears just for a second, both of you? If you go to 8th Day Books, you'll find both of my books there. And perhaps someday, very, very soon, you can go to Trinity, and you'll be there too, in a place of prominence. And probably $1 cheaper. Maybe call me. Okay, where's that? Maybe this is my point. So maybe today's the spark. I don't know. That's my only goal, is that like 3 people get sparked today. You know what, there's something to this. Probably you're already a pretty decent listener, but you want to be, this is the difference, this is the analogy I use with business owners. They're like, wow, I'm a pretty good listener. I'm like, yeah, it's great. Pretty good. Like, pretty good? Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is, you're a naturally good listener. Yeah, I think so. Great. Do you know what the natural response is if I were to throw you into a body of water taller than your head is? You drowned. That's the natural response. The learned response, you could say the artificial response, right? The rehearsed and skillful response is swimming or floating. And some people get so good at it, they get gold medals. And that's how I look at listening. The natural response in a crisis, if you are threatened by an employee, if your authority as a leader in your firm is threatened by an employee, the natural responses are to be aggressive about it, to threaten them back, basically, to blame them, or to get really passive and apologize when you shouldn't, and to avoid the conflict. That's what people naturally do. The natural response is to threats. If you didn't know, have you ever heard of fight and flight? That's not accurate, if you didn't know. Humans are way more creative than that. Naturally, how we respond, we fight. Some of us, very few of us, by the way, will fight. Many of us will posture. That means we'll signal that we would fight you, and we hope you go away. A lot of animals do that too. We will flee, or we'll submit. We don't like to talk about that. Sometimes we surrender. Those are the natural responses. The learn, rehearse, and probably the most appropriate response is to negotiate. So stand your ground and conduct discovery about why this person's being aggressive. What's the complaint of this employee? What's the emotion that's driving their behavior, right? How do they see it? What's their vision for this? How are they seeing it? That's not natural. It takes stress inoculation and rehearsal. So I think that's really important. So today's the spark. Knowledge would be read the book. And that's better than nothing. But then skillful is, the beauty of listening is you get opportunities to practice listening all the time. The missing ingredient I find is briefing and debriefing your listening opportunities. This, speaking to your point, knowing that you're going to need to slow it down. Let's say you're calling an employee and talking about performance. Okay, we can anticipate some of the things that could happen here. We do this with our call-outs. Okay, based on the intelligence, what do we anticipate in terms of emotions and vision and decisions and behavior? Okay, great, let's plan for that. And then after we're done, what went well? What should be reinforced? What should be discarded? We're not going to say I understand anymore, right? We're going to write down the things that we want to focus on going forward. So what you're seeing is it's an intentional process. That's how you build a habit. The highest expression of craft is culture. If it's truly your habit, then you'll begin to influence those around you to do it better. They'll see what you have and they'll want it. So the end of the road, in a sense, although it never is, the highest expression of craft is you make everybody around you better at that thing, and pretty soon your organization is known for that thing. So if a book helps, that's great. I offer consulting and coaching in these areas, in both active listening, but also negotiations. So that can be helpful. But mostly it would just be this: find some people around you that also have an interest and hold each other accountable. That's the only way we're going to get better, past knowledge, in my experience. Knowledge can be seductive and can kind of trap you. That's in the spiritual life too. You can possess a lot of spiritual books, but not spend a lot of time in prayer, contemplation, and reflection and discernment, because that doesn't take a book. Books could help, but it takes a commitment and investment in time. Sorry, I wish I had an easy button for you, but I've been actively engaged in this journey for 12 years, and I'm probably just getting okay at it. It's been worth it. So. I see people gathering their things. I take that often as a sign that it is time for the business day to begin. So Blake, thank you so much for being a great host. Thank you, Father.
Somebody turn? Oh, there we go. Dan, thank you so much. That was great. I'm sure there's a lot more questions we could ask. You alluded to the fact that you do some coaching, counseling on the side. Do you do workshops for business? This isn't part of the shtick here. He didn't ask me to do this. I'm just curious. So do you do workshops for companies and different things?
I do a lot of things for clients based upon their need. So maybe the simplest thing is, I know you won't all take me up on this, that's the only reason I'm offering, is there's some business cards if you take it. If there's something you're really struggling with at your firm and you want to improve it, or if you just have a general interest maybe for yourself personally to develop these skills, just reach out to me and it's a free conversation. And I may not tell you that I'm a good fit for you, and just don't be offended. It's probably more about me than just about you. But maybe there is a fit and I can help. If not, I'll send you someplace better. But that's workshops, keynotes, coaching, consulting, sure. But we won't know what's best if we don't talk a little bit about what's going on. So, and I get to know your name.
Perfect. Because where I'm going, where my thought process was if it made sense, and I haven't talked to Dan about this, to do a workshop through CAB. And I don't know what that would be, hour and a half, 2 hours. I'm sure he could go for 4 hours if he wanted to, but usually 2 hours workshop is about, just by a show of hands, would anybody be interested in attending that workshop? Okay, yeah, I thought that would be the response, and that's why I brought that up. So I'll visit with Dan offline, and then we'll see if we can't find a date, and maybe set something up via CAB where you could come back, and if you want to bring some of your team members from the business, I'm sure we could figure out the best way to facilitate that. So thank you, Dan. In wrapping up here, we do have a couple more things. So some of our events that we have coming up, September 22nd, Matt Schlatt, a lot of you know Matt. He was here, I guess it'll be 3 years ago, for CAB, our highest attended event so far. He's going to be here on September 22nd. And then November 10th, we're going to have a panel on Father Capon, including his nephew Ray Capon is going to be here. And you'll notice that date's in November. Some of you might have seen the recent news that has come out. We're going to hear a little bit more about that before we close today. But that's pretty exciting. And then, yes, we actually have speakers for next year already. Our first speaker is Dr. Jim Otteson. He's at Notre Dame, and he's director of the Center for Ethical Leadership. Some of you, that name may sound familiar if you listen to the Capon Men's podcast. He's been on there. And for all leaders, there's been some great episodes on leadership on that podcast. So if you haven't checked it out yet, check out the Capon's Men website, and there's a podcast. I'm going to take the liberty, we have a little bit of time. I'm going to show a brief video related to what we have coming up with Father Capon, and then I'm going to ask Jason Cyril to talk a little